Kiley, and my paper was on if the use of a functional analysis as an assessment treatment for problem behavior is ethical. Some points for why functional analysis isn't ethical is that procedure purposely sets up the environment in order for the behavior to occur. Intentionally increasing the risk of harm to individuals creates an environment where higher occurrences of problem behavior can occur. This violates the core ethical principle of do no harm. More harm is caused to the client and others around them. It is also unethical because treatment should reduce the occurrences of problem behavior, not increase them. This violates the BCBA Guideline 2.0, the behavior analysis responsibility to the client. They have the responsibility to operate in the best interest of the client. Increasing occurrences of problem behavior is not in the client's best interest. Practitioners' concerns. Practitioners have expressed a concern for a need of a functional assessment and the lack of resources to do a proper experimental functional assessment, also known as a functional analysis. They admit to passing on conducting the assessment and using descriptive assessments or personal judgment as more adequate measures. Some reasons why a functional analysis is ethical is behavioralists need to ask themselves two things. What is the right thing to do and what is worth doing? The right thing is providing clients with the best treatment outcome as possible. Functional analysis are the only assessment that can determine the function of a behavior which leads to an effective treatment. It is worth the risk of higher rates of problem behavior now to reduce the rates later. Functional analysis have to meet the characteristics of treatment environment that ensures dignity, health, and safety before being conducted. Under these characteristics, the physical safety is paramount, supervision and monitoring and proper program procedures are based on the function. The risk of harm depends on the topography of the behavior. For example, excessive amount of hand raising is less harm than if the behavior is aggression in the form of throwing objects, which can lead to more harm to the client and others. History of functional analysis treatments. In the mid to late 1960s, treatment for problem behaviors consisted of punishment in the form of aversive stimuli. These included Tabasco sauce, electric shock, and undiluted lemon juice. Laws established after these studies were passed that protected individuals from aversive procedures. In Wyatt versus Stickley in 1970 held that persons institutionalized as mentally retarded have a constitutional right to receive individual habilitation to enable each of them a realistic opportunity to lead to a more effective and meaningful life and return to society. In 1997, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was created. It provided each child with a disability with free, appropriate public education through an individualized education program in the least restrictive environment. Functional behavior assessments became an essential requirement, and regulations were made to them in terms of written policies, procedures, and guidelines. Amendments were made to IDEA in 2004 and 2006 after it was found that school districts were conducting inadequate FBAs and having limited sources of data. Below is a list of the different court cases where these were found. The Office of Special Education Programs have also created a criterion for when parental consent is needed for an FBA to be conducted. Assembly Bill 86 in California repealed the Hughes Bill for not following the requirements of IDEA. It was no longer required a functional analysis to be conducted, but instead practitioners addressed clients' problem behavior. No particular method was required, but these practitioners used the methods of developing goals, conducting behavioral assessments, and developing positive behavioral intervention and supports. There are BCBA guidelines that keep functional analysis in check. Guideline 2.0, the behavior analyst has the responsibility to operate under the best interest of the client. They need to ask what is in the best interest of the client. If an FA would produce too much harm to the client, then it is not conducted. Under Guideline 2.01, relates to the definition of the client. A client encompasses the client, their parent or guardian, institutional representative, agency, firm, and corporation. Informed consent has to be obtained from all aspects of the client before an FA can be conducted. Guideline 3.01 states that behavior analysts must obtain client or client surrogate's approval in writing before a behavioral assessment is implemented. The client and parents and guardian are told of the risks and procedures of a functional analysis. Under 3.02, the behavior analyst conducts a functional assessment by displaying the necessary data to develop an effective treatment change plan. Behavior analysis must provide the best practice, which consists of determining the function of the behavior, and a functional analysis is a part of this process. FA research. Early studies done in 1969 and 1971 explored methods of punishment in the form of electric shock and extinction to reduce the occurrences of destructive behavior to 0 levels. These aren't ideal procedures to use because harm is caused and rapid rates of behavior happen during the early sessions. Ethical considerations were taken before using electric shock by it being approved by the institution's Committee on Research and Ethics and the minimum level of shock to create discomfort. The standard method of functional analysis was created by Iwata in 1983 to identify the functional properties of problem behavior. 4 conditions are used: social disapproval, also known as attention; academic demand, also known as escape; unstructured play, which showed as control condition; and alone. In this study, 9 individuals with intellectual disabilities who engaged in self-injurious behavior. Ethical considerations were taken prior to the procedure. These included procedures being reviewed and approved by the Human Rights Committee, participants completing a medical exam for their physical status. Criterion was set by physicians for when physical harm became too high. If there was an immediate risk of physical damage, observations were ended. They were also checked by a doctor or nurse after every 4 sessions for any physical damage. The result showed that 6 out of the 9 participants, the occurrences of problem behavior happened at a high rate in one of the stimulus conditions. The researchers made further ethical justifications. They provided a rationale for conducting the functional analysis. They emphasized having the same degree of risk as in the client's natural environment where the behavior occurs. These behaviors usually resulted in bleeding or swelling, which creates harm. If the behavior didn't happen at a rapid rate in the natural environment, then behavior analytic services wouldn't be needed. Also provided a termination criteria for when to end the functional analysis, which follows under the BCBA guideline 4.0 termination criteria. The experimenters did not harm the clients and were working in the best interest for the clients. Further FA research Iwata in 1994 looked at 152 functional analysis conducted with individuals who engaged in self-injurious behaviors. All the studies took similar ethical precautions as the Iwata 1982 study. Only 7 of the 152 sets showed inconsistent patterns of respondings, and no function was able to be defined. Less than 2% of the sessions were terminated early due to risk of injury. demonstrates that a functional analysis is effective at identifying the environmental factors for a problem behavior. Hagopian et al. In 2003 looked at 176 inpatient cases and found that 93.3% of the functions were identified after slight modifications were made. Beaver, Iwata, and Lehrman in 2013 compiled 30 years of functional analyses and found out of the 445 studies, the function of the behavior was identified for 91.7% of the studies. A brief functional analysis was created in order to reduce the amount of time an FA takes to conduct. Session conditions are less than 10 minutes, which reduces the amount of problem behavior that can occur and reduces the risk of harm. Northup et al. In 1992 used a brief functional analysis for 3 clients with severe intellectual disabilities that were able to define the function. Also taught an alternative behavior to decrease problem behavior. This shows direct evidence of the treatment utility of an FA procedure. Derby et al. In 1992 looked at 79 cases of a brief FA in outpatient settings. The results showed that 74% of cases, the function of the behavior was determined. And also, 65% of cases, there was an increase in appropriate behavior when a contingency was in place for an alternative behavior. FA of a precursor behavior. Another way to reduce the risk of harm is to conduct an FA on the precursor behavior that precedes the problem behavior. Smith and Churchill conducted an FA for 4 individuals, both their precursor and problem behavior. The results say that both types of FA obtained the same results, and the amount of problem behavior was less during the precursor behavior. Comparison of assessments. So Camp, Iwata, Hahnemann, and Bloom compared descriptive and functional analysis of 7 participants and antecedent and consequent events in relation to identifying the function of problem behavior. The results showed that outcomes collected by 2 measures did not match, and consequent events were able to identify the function of the behavior more. Thompson and Iwata found similar results. Out of 12 data sets, only 3 of them matched when comparing descriptive and functional analyses. These findings support that descriptive analysis are a poor means for identifying functional relations. Functional analyses should be used over descriptive analysis for determining the function of problem behavior, which is shown to lead to an effective treatment. Follows under the BCPA Guideline 210 responsibility to client and treatment efficiency of the behavior analyst. Discussion. Overall, an FA is ethical because necessary measures are taken to reduce the amount of risk. They are approved by the Human Rights Committee, informed consent from client and parents or guardians, examination done by physicians prior to the assessment, use of a brief FA or an FA of precursor to behavior when possible, terminates the assessment when the risk is too high, supported by research that leads to an effective treatment, and follows the BCBA guidelines. Future research needs to be done to find out whether FA procedures actually increase the risk of harm. This can be done by comparing sessions within and outside of the session conditions. Only can be done when further developments are made to measurements of severity of problem behavior and frequency and long-term consequences of treatment. Thank you.